Have you ever received feedback at work that made you want to defend yourself immediately? Maybe your manager said, "Your communication needs improvement."
Or,
"You need to take more initiative." Or perhaps, "Your performance isn't meeting expectations." Your first instinct might be to explain. Maybe you want to say, "But that's not what happened. Nobody told me that before." There were circumstances you don't know about, and sometimes you may have a legitimate point. But there's something important to understand. How you respond to critical feedback can matter almost as much as the feedback itself. Performance reviews are designed to assess work and identify strengths and areas for improvement, and useful feedback is generally more actionable when it is specific rather than vague. Indeed. So today, we're going to talk about how to receive critical feedback professionally, how to ask better questions, how to determine what you can actually learn from criticism, and how to turn difficult feedback into measurable career growth. Let's get into it. 1. Don't react immediately. The first rule is simple. Don't react emotionally. Critical feedback can trigger embarrassment, frustration, anger, or defensiveness. That's normal. But you don't have to let the first emotion determine your response. If your manager says, "Your project management needs improvement," you don't have to immediately respond, "I disagree." Instead, take a moment. Listen. Let them finish. Then say, "Thank you for explaining that. I'd like to understand the concern better." That sentence gives you something extremely valuable.
time.
Time to think. Time to ask questions. Time to understand what is actually being said. 2. Separate the feedback from your identity. This is one of the most important mental shifts you can make. Feedback about your work is not automatically feedback about your worth as a person. If someone says, "Your project updates have been inconsistent," that doesn't mean you're a bad employee. It means there is a behavior or outcome that needs attention. That's something you can work with. You can improve a behavior. You can develop a skill. You can change a process. You can correct a mistake. But if you turn every criticism into a judgment about your identity, you'll naturally become defensive. Instead, ask, what information is contained inside this feedback? 3. Ask for a specific example. This is one of the most powerful questions you can use. Could you give me a specific example? Imagine your manager says, "You need to communicate better." That's vague. What does better mean? Better written communication? Faster responses? More frequent updates? Clearer explanations? Better listening? You don't want to guess.
Ask.
Could you give me a specific example of when my communication caused a problem? Now you have something concrete. Maybe the manager explains, "There were 2 occasions where a project delay wasn't communicated until the deadline was close." Now the problem is much clearer.
You can actually work on that.
4. Ask what better performance looks like. Knowing what went wrong is only half the conversation. You also need to know what should happen instead.
Ask.
What would a stronger approach have looked like? This is where criticism starts becoming development. For example, your manager says, "You should have communicated the delay earlier." You can ask, "At what point would you have expected me to raise the issue?" Now you have an expectation. Perhaps the answer is, "As soon as you realize the deadline is at risk." That's actionable. You now know what to do differently next time. 5. Don't automatically argue your case. There may be circumstances your manager doesn't know about. Maybe another department caused the delay. Maybe you didn't receive information on time. Maybe your priorities changed. Maybe you were dealing with an unusually heavy workload. Context matters. But there is a difference between providing context and becoming defensive. Instead of, "That's not my fault,"
Try.
"I'd like to provide some context about what happened." Then explain the facts calmly. You're not surrendering your perspective. You're communicating it professionally. 6. Ask how the conclusion was reached. Sometimes you may genuinely disagree with the feedback. That's okay. You don't have to pretend to agree. But before deciding that the feedback is unfair, ask, "Can you help me understand how you reached that conclusion?" This can reveal something important. Maybe your manager is looking at a result you hadn't considered. Maybe they received feedback from another stakeholder. Maybe expectations changed. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Or perhaps the criticism really is based on incomplete information. You won't know unless you understand the reasoning behind it. 7. Look for patterns. One piece of criticism doesn't necessarily define your professional performance, but repeated feedback deserves attention. Suppose one manager tells you, "You need to communicate earlier." You think, "Okay." Then another colleague says, "Sometimes we don't know there's a problem until late." Then another project produces the same issue. At that point, you may be looking at a pattern. Patterns are valuable. They show you where a small adjustment could produce a large improvement. Don't automatically dismiss repeated feedback simply because it is uncomfortable. Sometimes the uncomfortable information is the information you most need. 8. Identify what you can control. Not every workplace problem is within your control. You can't control every decision your manager makes. You can't control every colleague. You can't control every organizational change. You can't control every deadline. But you can ask, what part of the situation can I influence? Maybe you can communicate earlier. Maybe you can ask for clarification sooner. Maybe you can improve your organization. Maybe you can document your work more consistently. Maybe you can escalate risks before they become problems. Focus your energy on what you can actually change. 9. Turn feedback into an improvement plan. This is where many people stop. They receive feedback. They feel bad. They think about it for a few days. Then they return to work exactly as before. Don't do that. Turn feedback into an action plan. Let's use an example. Feedback. Your project updates aren't consistent. Problem. Updates are sometimes delayed. Desired behavior. Provide regular updates and communicate risks earlier. Action. Send a weekly progress summary and immediately flag major risks. Measurement. Track whether updates are sent consistently and whether issues are communicated before deadlines are threatened. Now you've transformed criticism into a measurable development goal. That's much more powerful. 10. Ask which improvement matters most. Sometimes you receive several pieces of feedback at once. Don't try to fix everything simultaneously. Ask, which area should I prioritize first? This question is incredibly useful. Maybe your manager identifies communication as the highest priority. Now you know where to focus. Once that improves, you can move to the next area. Career development works better when you focus your energy instead of scattering it across 10 different weaknesses. 11. Don't let criticism erase your strengths. Receiving critical feedback doesn't mean you're doing everything wrong. You can be excellent at one part of your role and still need improvement somewhere else. You might be extremely reliable but need better presentation skills. Technically strong but need stronger delegation. A great problem solver but need to communicate decisions earlier. Highly organized but need more confidence in meetings. Professional development isn't about becoming flawless. It's about becoming more effective. 12. Ask what you should continue doing. Feedback conversations shouldn't only focus on weaknesses. Ask, what should I continue doing? This helps you identify your strengths. Maybe your manager values your reliability. Maybe you're trusted with difficult customers. Maybe you're excellent at solving unexpected problems. Maybe you consistently deliver work on time. Knowing your strengths matters because you can build your career around them. 13. Ask what you should stop doing. Here's another question many professionals don't ask. Is there anything I should stop doing because it isn't adding enough value? This can reveal surprising information. Maybe you're spending too much time on low-priority work. Maybe you're duplicating someone else's efforts. Maybe you're attending meetings where your contribution isn't necessary. Maybe you're focusing on activity rather than outcomes. Sometimes career growth isn't about doing more. It's about doing less of the wrong things. 14. Follow up after the conversation. Don't let important feedback disappear into the void. After you've had time to work on it, follow up. You could say, I've been working on the communication issue we discussed. I'd appreciate your feedback on whether you've noticed an improvement. That's a strong professional signal. It shows accountability, initiative, self-awareness, willingness to improve. It also gives you another opportunity to calibrate your performance. Performance conversations are increasingly being treated as an ongoing dialogue rather than something that only happens during an annual review. Gallup.com. 15. What if the feedback is unfair? This is an important question. What if you genuinely believe the feedback is inaccurate? Don't panic. Don't retaliate. Don't immediately send an angry message. Instead, document the facts. Review the relevant expectations. Gather evidence where appropriate. Ask for specific examples. Explain your perspective calmly. For example, I understand the concern. I have a different understanding of what happened, so I'd like to provide some context. Then explain the facts. Professional disagreement is possible. You don't need to become defensive or aggressive to advocate for yourself. 16. What if you never received this feedback before? Sometimes employees receive criticism during a formal review that they say they've never heard before. That can be particularly frustrating. If that happens, ask, could you help me understand when this concern first became apparent? Then, what would you have wanted me to do differently at that point? You're gathering information. You're also establishing a clearer understanding of expectations going forward. A formal review shouldn't be the only opportunity for feedback, and regular conversations can help prevent surprises. Human Resources Degree. 17. Don't retaliate. This deserves its own section. If you receive criticism, don't respond by withdrawing effort, gossiping, becoming hostile, ignoring colleagues, deliberately slowing your work, creating conflict, trying to embarrass the person who gave you feedback. You may feel justified in the moment, but your reaction can create a much larger professional problem. Remember, you are not only being evaluated on the original issue. People also notice how you respond when things become uncomfortable. 18. Use feedback to build your reputation. Your professional reputation isn't based on never making mistakes. Nobody gets through an entire career without mistakes. Your reputation is also shaped by your response when problems are identified. Do you listen? Do you ask questions? Do you take responsibility? Do you improve? Do you follow through? Those behaviors communicate something powerful. They communicate that you can be trusted with responsibility. 19. Create a feedback log. Here's a practical strategy. Create a simple document called Professional Feedback Log. Whenever you receive meaningful feedback, record
Date.
feedback received,
Specific example.
what I learned, action I will take, how I'll measure improvement, follow-up date. This creates a record of your development. Over time, you can look back and see patterns. You may discover that you've improved significantly in areas that were once weaknesses. That's useful information during future performance reviews and career conversations. 20. Prepare before your next review. Don't wait until your manager starts speaking. Prepare yourself. Before the review, think about, what feedback have I received this year? What have I improved? What mistakes have I learned from? What skills have I developed? What challenges have I overcome? What still needs work? This makes the conversation much more productive. Performance reviews can be used to refocus priorities, recognize strengths, and identify development opportunities. Indeed. The 5 questions to remember. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember these 5 questions. 1. Could you give me a specific example? Turn vague feedback into concrete information. 2. What would a stronger approach have looked like? Understand the expected behavior. 3. Which area should I prioritize improving first? Focus your effort. 4. How will we know that I've improved? Create a measurable outcome. 5. Could we check in again after I've had time to work on this? Turn feedback into an ongoing development conversation. Final thoughts. Critical feedback isn't comfortable. Sometimes it will be accurate. Sometimes it will be incomplete. Sometimes you'll disagree with it. And occasionally, the feedback may be delivered poorly. But you can still control your response. Listen.
Pause.
Ask questions. Request examples. Clarify expectations. Separate facts from emotions. Identify what you can control. Create an improvement plan. Then follow through. Don't allow one difficult conversation to define your career. Use it as information. Use it as a mirror. Use it as a development opportunity. Because your career isn't built by never being criticized. It's built by becoming better at handling the moments when criticism arrives. Good professionals receive feedback. Strong professionals learn from it. Resilient professionals turn it into progress. And sometimes, the feedback you least wanted to hear contains exactly the information you needed to hear. If this video helped you, subscribe for more practical career strategies on professional growth, workplace communication, career security, performance reviews, and building a career that can survive change. Listen carefully, learn deliberately, improve consistently. That is how critical feedback becomes career growth.